Good evening. It is my proud privilege to extend a warm welcome to everyone present here on a very special occasion, Founders Day celebration of Aditya Institution. We all need this occasion in the air to remind us that we do not work, live, or play in isolation. We work together, we are all in this together, and we have stood the test of time, which has a great history. For us all, it is unarguably the most important day in our college calendar, a day when we acknowledge the founders of our institution, their vision, values, and their legacy. It is an opportunity to remember our achievements, congratulate each other, and to praise the memories of this wonderful institute. At the dawn of another incredible year for us, at our Aditya institution, learning from our reflections of the past, which paves way for our future milestones, goals, and determinations to take our institution to the next level, defines the day. I would now request our principal, Dr. Ganesh Babu sir, to shed some light on the building block, journey of Aditya institution, and address the gathering.
Thank you, Jyoti.
Yes.
Dr. B.A. Vishwanath, Chairman of Aditya Group of Institutions, Senate Member of Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Science, a towering personality, simple, down-to-earth person with exceptional leadership qualities. He has completed his PhD in pharmaceutical science from Bangalore University. Being the chairman of Aditya Group of Institutions, he is being responsible for starting many educational institutions in various streams, committed to serving the society in the noblest of the ways by establishing institutions through empowering the society. Aditya Group of Institutions took shape from 1998, 2000 SSR College of Science and Commerce under the recognition of Government of Karnataka and affiliation College of Nursing under the affiliation of Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences. 2005 Aditya Bangalore Institute for Pharmacy Education and Research under the affiliation of Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences. 2008 Aditya Institute of Management Sciences and Research at Yelahanka, Bangalore under the affiliation of Bangalore University. 2008 Aditya National Public School. 2009 Aditya PU College. 2015 Aditya Academy of Architecture and Design under the affiliation of Vishveshwara Technological University, Belgaum. 2018 Aditya College of Physiotherapy. 2018 Aditya College of Applied Health Sciences. 2018 Avishka College of Nursing. He leads a team of 257 staff members and around 2,540 plus students from across India and abroad studying at Aditya Group of Institutions. Awards and honors. His passion for providing quality education at the aspirants has taken his Aditya Group of Institution name all around the world, and this led to him being deservedly honored for this year with the Certificate of Excellence as the Best Educational Group of Institutions for the year 2019 at the National Education Excellence Award 2019 by the National Press Council of India Charitable Trust and the Newspaper Association of Karnataka for the outstanding achievements for exemplary commitment and impactful positive contribution to education in India. He has been awarded as an outstanding pharmaceutical scientist at Sri Lanka in the year 2013. He has been awarded the Golden School Award by the Indian Talent Group from Navi Mumbai in the year 2018. He has been awarded the Rajiv Gandhi Gold Medal Award by Global Economic Progress and Research Association, New Delhi, in the year 2015. Achievements. He is nominated for the second time as a Senate member of the Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences for the present session 2018 to 2021, as he was earlier nominated during the session 2008 to 2011. He is nominated as advisor for Scientific Committee Pharmacy of Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences. He is the Educational Board member for various national and international journals. He has been the chairman for the scientific session of Indian Pharmaceutical Congress held at Manipal in December 2010. He is the life member of various pharmaceutical associations in India. He has presented and published several national and international papers, presentation in India and abroad. On behalf of all principal staff and students of Aditya Group of Institutions, I take the privilege to welcome you, sir, in your absentia. We have an announcement due to Dr. B.A. Vishwanath, the chairman, sir, has been very actively involved in the last 3 months in this pandemic emergency activities. And today, due to unforeseen emergencies, sir had to travel out of his place. So he has conveyed his wishes on this celebration of. I would take this opportunity to welcome all the faculty members, staff, students of Aditya Group of Institutions and all the guests. I would like to also welcome Mrs. Pushpa Shetty Madam, AIMS Director, Mrs. Suchitra, In charge Principal, ABIPER, Mrs. Shobha, Principal Nursing, Mr. Franklin, Principal Physiotherapy, Mr. Nandish, Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. Chikana, and all teaching, non-teaching staff of Aditya Institutions. Thank you, and over to you, Jyoti.
Thank you, sir. On this auspicious occasion, we are happy to announce that in the near future, we will be launching a new college campus, a project which was conceived in 2017 and formally announced by our beloved chairman, Dr. B.A. Vishwanath, in our first Cygnus Fest in the presence of Architect Alok Ranjan sir, then Executive Council member, and Architect Krishna Rao Jaisim sir as the guest, and actress Sudha Rani as the guest of honor. Today, we would like to formally unveil the AAAD campus video, a virtual walkthrough in our new campus. On behalf of our beloved Chairman Dr. B.A. Vishwanath, we would like to unveil Thank you, sir. AAAD Incubation webinar series has been encouraged by our spectators across the country. At AAAD, we believe in knowledge shared doubles. Enacting this, we are glad to announce the official release of our first edition of Design Bulletin, June 2020, a compilation of all the webinar series on the social platform. On behalf of our beloved chairman, Dr. B.A. Vishwanath, we would like to release the Digest Bulletin of June 2020. We are fortunate to have following guest speakers with us: Architect Leena Mathur, Principal Architect at Kumar Consultants and Chairperson in IIA Karnataka Chapter. Architect G.B. Mathur, Mathur Associates, and President, Practicing Architects Association, Bangalore. Architect Jimmy Lim, Principal Architect at Jimmy Lim Designs, Kuala Lumpur. Architect N. Savita, Principal Architect at Sachin Design Solution, Bangalore, and Executive Council Member, VTU. Architect Jimmy Lim, Principal Architect at Jimmy Lim Designs, Kuala Lumpur, and our guest of honor, Architect Alok Ranjan, former Executive Council Member, Council of Architecture, New Delhi. Architect Gautam Shastri, Director, Padmadev Consultants, Bangalore. Architect Tapasya Das, Independent Consultant, Bangalore. Architect James Law, CEO at Cybertecture International, Hong Kong, and our guest of honor, Architect Amok Kumar Gupta, Board of Governors, Chairperson, SPA, New Delhi. Architect Manish Paul, founder of Art Gyan, an Indian architecture podcast. Architect Bala Maheshwaran, founder of KA Architecture and Studio Thesis Research Lab, Chennai. And our guest of honor, Architect Manoharan Jayaraman, member, Council of Architecture, New Delhi. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome our speaker, Architect Saagar Tulshan. Architect Saagar Tulshan is an Indian architect and entrepreneur. He is currently a partner with ROOH Studio, an Indo European design collective present in India, Ireland, and Finland. Through the formative years of his career, he has worked with Venkataraman Associates, taking lead on design communication, architecture, and urbanism. A widely famed project during his stints includes the Church Street, a redevelopment project in Bangalore. Saagar is the founder of an international collaboration, the Open Box Project, exploring architecture and design through tactical urban interventions, research, and outreach programs. His notable projects include Level Up, an urban pavilion in Croatia, Reflection, a meditation pavilion in Kerala, Second Skin, an open source design project to create variable multifunction shelters for the homeless and the refugees. He is also the co-founder of Portal Frame, a local intelligence startup that creates actionable insights from urban data, a graduate from MSRIT School of Architecture. Sagar is the former vice president of the National Association of Students of Architecture, India. He has presented India at several architecture congregations over the years and continues to be an active part of networks like the European Architecture Students Assembly. Before we start the session, we have two important announcements. To have uninterrupted session, all the delegates and participants are requested to drop their queries in chat box given below. All the delegates and participants are requested to mute their mic and switch off their videos. Now I would like to request architect Saagar Tulshan to take over the session.
All right. Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Hi, everybody. Firstly, congratulations to Aditya Academy of Architecture. I hope you will set high benchmarks and produce motivated, caring, and driven professionals for the future. You have the tools now. You have a new great campus, of course, once you're allowed into it, and some really good guides, mentors, and educators. And I should know that because I've studied under them too. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so can someone let me know if you can see my screen?
Yes, sir, we can see.
Great. So let's start. I'm really excited to talk to all of you about my journey for the last few years since I've graduated. Being a fairly young architect in the industry and also through my years in architecture school, I wanted to take you through some lessons that I've learned, some thoughts that I've added to my philosophy of architecture and life in general. I hope you will find inspiration and motivation to build your own approach after this session. All right, so this is the Maslow's pyramid of human needs. Abraham Maslow talks about how humans go through this hierarchy of needs in their life, right from basics like food and shelter, all the way up to the ultimate fulfillment through self-actualization, right? So I have a hypothesis that this exists somehow differently for architects and designers, and I'll come to that at the end of my presentation. So I've divided this presentation into three parts. First is the orientation, where I want to talk about my introduction to architecture and architecture school. Then the path, where I want to share some insights that I've built through my journey all the way from school to this day of my practice. And then the beyond, where I want to show you some examples of work where these lessons and insights have helped me a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go backwards in chronological order and start with the beyond first, and then to the path and square one to orientation. So I've really had the wonderful opportunity of starting my career with one of the leading architecture firms in India, where I learned how to design large-scale building concepts along with urban design and research. I also happened to work with a large startup in 2019, where I was involved in a very productized delivery of design on a large scale. But the projects I want to talk to you about today are very, very different, very non-commercial, very different in scale, in context, in design and construction approach. And in fact, most of them have been built by us. And like I said, these are a product of the learnings and insights that I will talk throughout the presentation. So with a few like-minded people in 2015, I started a collective called the Open Box Project with a simple objective of collaborating with talented people across the world to explore design through small-scale interventions, through workshops, research projects, and basically anything that we could get our hands on. And I'll show you a few projects from this collective. So this is the first sort of small intervention that we did. And we literally called it the Open Box, because it's literally an open box. And this was a small construction workshop that we did at the annual NASA convention in Jaipur. And the intention was to explore wood construction and joinery through an open pavilion. And the space was meant to provide a space for students to hang out, to sit in, and to play around, and even host small gatherings. So the entire structure was made by hand over 3 days. We used this, because we wanted to explore wood joinery, we used this sort of 3-axis joinery to fix the structural members, and we used lap joints to connect the vertical fins. That was literally it. These were 2 components of the joinery of the structure. And we simply wanted to understand what it takes to build a small timber pavilion like this ourselves, and that's what we tried to achieve. The next is reflection pavilion. This is another design and build project that we did in the hills of Vagaman, Kerala. We worked with about 35 students of architecture to build this pavilion. This was another timber construction project where we want to sort of explore and push the limit of do-it-yourself structural design. So this was our site setup. It was on the shoulder of a hill. And although the heat in Kerala was killing us, I think the beautiful view made up for that. Mind you, these are all architecture students who were working with us. So this project was a really nice construction logistical challenge. We literally worked over 3 days and nights non-stop to realize it by ourselves. This is another couple of pictures from the construction process. You can see how tall the structure actually is for just constructing it by yourself without any heavy equipment. And this is all done by hand. So the pavilion by itself is about 5 meters, almost 5 meters tall. It's about 2.5 meters wide. It has this elevated deck that you can see where people can sit, they can meditate, they can reflect while enjoying a beautiful view of the valley. It has a space below where you can take shelter from rain. The pavilion had to be open and transparent because it would be criminal to block off the views that the nature of the site had to offer. So this was the final product. Next, I want to talk to you about a very special project, which Jyoti mentioned in my bio as well. This was, we call it the Level Up Pavilion. And this is a pavilion, again, which we designed and built ourselves with architecture students as part of the European Architecture Students Assembly in Croatia in 2018. Now, this was a very site-specific adaptive reuse project where we wanted to bring life to this disused rooftop and machine room that you see, the rectangular box that is dripping out from a large industrial warehouse. Now, this building, this large warehouse that you can see in the plan, was going to be converted to a cultural center for when Rijeka, the city where we did this, would become Europe's culture capital in 2020, which now I'm guessing is on hold because of COVID. And well, 2020 is generally cancelled, so that's a different conversation altogether. So this is the final product, and this town, Rijeka, has a very industrial heritage. It's got a harbor where the site is, and it's right next to a canal, which you can see in the picture. Now we wanted to bring this context out in its aesthetics and the structure as well, which is why we use scaffolding and exposed timber, and you can see that sort of industrial aesthetic in the pavilion. Now, we constructed this project over 2 weeks with a beautiful team of 20 participants from more than 15 countries. Just some pictures from the process. Everything from planning the project to assembling it, putting the scaffolding in place, to actually executing the platforms. In fact, we didn't even have access to cranes. So the way we actually hoisted these platforms was by rope. So we literally went back a decade or more into construction process, and we did it all by ourselves. Now, this was the final product. and we've been told that the locals love using it. We've been fortunate enough to have the project published in a bunch of platforms. It was also mentioned in Design's top pavilions of the year for 2019. Now, the next project I want to talk to you about is something we call City Stories. This was a sort of theoretical research project that we did in Bangalore with a bunch of talented students. The intention was one, to critically examine the role of the relationship between an architect and the city, and two, to understand the city on a more micro level from the lens of its everyday users rather than the lens of the planner or the architect. And as we wanted to visit a lot of Bangalore's urban nodes and neighborhoods, turns out a huge part of that process was just pushing down broken buses and being stuck in traffic jams, obviously. But what happened as part of this is that we ended up documenting and studying some beautiful aspects of the city. For one, we spent time with a spectrum of users and documented their experience of everyday city spaces. We tried to understand how some spaces unintentionally and organically turn into rich social spaces of the city. We spent time with pedestrians, with hawkers, with autowalas, shoppers and shop owners, and tried to connect their perception to our analysis of these spaces. Now this workshop, it was amazing because this workshop quickly became a lab of exchanging and building ideas and observations using tools and frameworks of study that we hadn't used before to understand public spaces. And more importantly, we spent time to help the students develop new approaches and perspectives to not just architecture and urbanism, but to the humans that were part of it. What you see here is all the participants holding up their takeaways from this project. I'm not sure if it's legit. Great. So now, over the last couple of years, I've worked with a very special nonprofit called Lakir, which is an organization focused on helping raise the quality of life in cities and helping in making cities more equitable for its people. And we want to do this through a data-driven approach to urban planning and administration. Now, why we wanted to do this is because over the last over the last 2 decades, more in fact, since the 1970s, India has been preparing for the biggest human migration ever on the planet. We had projected that by 2030, 600 million people will have moved to urban areas. Now, of course, we wonder how this will change post-COVID, but the lockdown and the mass exodus of our migrant workers has only shown us how broken our urban systems are. Now, our cities are our social and economic hubs, and they're in a dismal state of sustainability, and they will completely implode if we don't fix them. Now, what we realize is if we take a data-driven approach, we can probably help solve some of these issues, if not all of them. Now, at Lakir, what we did is we built this geospatial analytical tool called CitySight that helps administrators measure and improve health by monitoring a bunch of indicators like transport, health, education, water, housing, administrative boundaries, and many more. So basically, all these data sets come into this one single system where administrators, planners can see them together and make more informed decisions about the city and how to run the city. I quickly want to talk to you about one success story out of this project. This case was of Hyderabad, and we realized that there is a bunch of affordable housing projects in Hyderabad that are failing. And we wanted to figure out why this is happening. So what we did is we took we mapped every single affordable housing unit in Hyderabad and figured out where they're located. What we also did is we tried to understand what are the amenities and support system that is built around these existing affordable housing units that is probably not there for the others. And we learned something really interesting. And this is also something we tend to forget and fail to understand as architects and planners, that when we are dealing with informal housing, with affordable housing, we need to acknowledge that there's an existing support system, an entire enabling environment of social infrastructure like education, like healthcare, like job opportunities that actually enables a quality of life for these inhabitants. And if that is missing in this project that you're proposing, it's bound to fail. So that's what we realize, and we realize that we're going to map that. So this is a map of all these affordable housing units. Whichever one is in red, it does not have any commercial complex or commercial zone within 3 kilometers. What that means is that basically all of these inhabitants would have no access to commercial opportunities in their area. We also mapped if they had access to healthcare. And we realized, again, a majority of these housing developments didn't have access to any affordable healthcare within 3 kilometers. Very interestingly, we also mapped whether these developments have any access to transport and something as basic as bus systems. And then if you see, so red, the symbols in red are the developments which have no access to bus stops. And we realized that a majority of these housing developments are in what we're calling urban transport deserts. And this has been one of the biggest factors why people don't even want to move there, right? And we took this information back to the administrators. So I was saying that we took this information back to the administrators, and they realized that this is a gap that needs to be bridged. And we had our first impact out of this. And basically the administrators extended all of their bus lines to connect to these housing units. And this, for me, is a great example of data-driven impact. Next, I want to talk to you about a very unique project again. This is something that we call Second Skin, and we started thinking about this project. This is again a part of the Open Box project, and we started thinking about Second Skin somewhere in mid-2019, and we basically wanted to explore the question to answer was, how do we help homeless people in India, and how do we help people who are running away from war-torn zones or becoming refugees and basically have to run overnight and have no access to tools or to systems that can help them. This is where it started, and we realized that if we can create a framework of design which is at the intersection of product design, textile design, and architecture, maybe we can create a design framework that any user can take, understand it, use materials that are around them, and use this framework to create their own designs, to create their own objects. Now, I'll tell you what I mean by that. What we really wanted to do is create a framework of product design, which would become which would basically inform a basic need of shelter. So we realized that this has to be material agnostic, so that people, they don't really have to look for a material to be able to create these objects. We realized that it has to be agnostic of skill. Anybody with any level of skill or no skill at all should be able to use this design framework to create objects for themselves. What all of that meant is that we had to reimagine how fundamental material joinery worked. And we realized that the way we connect fabric, the way we connect fabric to objects, the way we connect fabric to maybe other structural members has to be completely relooked at. It can't be using zips. It can't be using stitching, for example. So we worked with this a really talented textile designer from Ahmedabad. His name is Anuj Sharma, who came up with this sort of joinery system called button masala. That's what you see in the GIF here, which basically replaces buttons, replaces stitches, replaces zips by this pod system, where you create pods in a fabric and you use them as basic blocks of connection. I'll show you how. Oh, sorry. So when we said we wanted to be multi-transformable, what we meant was we wanted to be objects of necessity to these users. That meant it had to be a life jacket. It meant it had to be a raincoat, a hammock, a tent, a bag, etc. So that's the kind of spectrum that we wanted this object to be transformable on. A big part of our philosophy was also that we we were very anti-product. And what that means is that we didn't want this to be a finished design product that you go and buy from a store. It had to be something that the user could make for themselves. What we essentially wanted to do is replace the designer with the user themselves so that they are in control of what they are creating. So this is how we started prototyping. This is at Anuj's studio in Ahmedabad. We built this grid system on fabrics, and we use the same fabric. The same grid system is what you see across these three examples. And we prototyped a storage system. The same fabric was used to create this chest that you can see in the middle in its various forms. And the same fabric was, again, the same fabric system was used to create a tent. So this is how we started looking at it. And then we wanted to convert this to a workshop at IASA in Switzerland to further prototype and actually build products out of it. So that's why we started. And these were our wonderful participants at IASA in Switzerland. We started looking at simple forms of these fabric objects and shelters. We started looking at how these connect with each other, how they connect with other objects, and how they connect to existing structures. Then we started going a step forward. We said, okay, now let's see if it converts to a large raincoat. Does it convert to a bag? Does it even convert to a hammock? And that's when we started testing these prototypes. And after this process, what we did is we asked each of the participants to come up with their user groups. And we told them that, okay, you define a user group, and we will then create a prototype which works for that user group. And I'll quickly take you through those. So this is Angela from Croatia. She wanted to work with refugee kids who are on the run with their parents who are, going through trauma. So she wanted to create something that acts as a play object, but also is of some function. So she created this bag that also converts to a weatherproof tent and also has this sort of play stuff that the children can play around with while they're inside the shelter. This is Adriana from Greece, and Adriana wanted to create a biker jacket that would convert to a temporary shelter. So this is what we ended up creating with her, and this is what the shelter looks like. But another interesting thing that we worked on with Adriana was this cotton sort of fabric. And instead of the pods, we replaced them with seeds. So the buttons that you see, the pods that look like buttons, are actually full of seeds. And the idea here was that when you find your home, or when you find that place you want to settle, you can take this jacket off, you can throw it on the ground, you punch the seeds, the pods into the ground, and at some point, this fabric object will disintegrate and you will have your own farm. So we explored ideas like that as well. This is Zdravka from Croatia. Zdravka wanted to create some sort of a large raincoat that converted to a sleeping bag. So that's what we tried to explore with her. And what we also did is this raincoat would turn into this modular shelter, which is very easy to deploy. So that was the guiding factor here. This is Marinos from Cyprus. He was interested in creating a multifunction object and shelter for a high altitude climber. So we started with looking at, okay, how you got to keep the hiker safe, you got to keep the climber snug. So this is how we started prototyping. And then, of course, we had to make this object and shelter very snug, very fitting, and so that you could move in it. So this is the next prototype that we built with him. And then, of course, a hiker has to carry a lot of objects. So then we started prototyping how we can create spaces within this garment where the climber can carry objects like this. And of course, this jacket would convert to a one-person shelter like this. This is Nida from Turkey. And I wonder if you can, I would like you to guess what we were prototyping here, but I'll tell you anyway. She wanted to work with these refugees who are often taking boats to run away from these areas of conflict. And what would happen a lot is we read that these people were given fake life jackets, and they would often end up drowning in the ocean. So with her, we wanted to prototype if we could create a life jacket. We literally used bottles in this prototype, and this is what it looks like. and we also tested it, and surprisingly, it works. This is Yulia. She was from Moldova, and with her, the concept was to create a deep pocketed jacket that would help gatherers sort of collect things as they're going through the forest, and this is what we ended up creating. This is Sheila from Serbia. She also had a very interesting user group. She wanted to work with the young mothers, especially gypsy mothers in Serbia, who are often who are part of the dilapidated population in their context. And she wanted to create a jacket for a young mother who could use it to also cradle her baby. So there's a baby pod inside where she can keep the baby safely, and it's also weatherproof and acts like a jacket. This is how it converts to a pitch shelter. We also experimented with how we could connect multiple shelters together. Modularity was of essence to us, scale was of essence to us. So we also experimented if we could create a large shelter which would fit about 10 to 15 people. All right, so next I want to talk to you about ROOH. Almost mid last year, end of last year, the same people who I worked with at the Open Box project, we realized that it would be time to open our own studio and explore architecture and design on another scale. So we started ROOH Studio, where we strive to do contextual, strategic, responsible and thoughtful architecture. We're about 6 partners. ROOH means soul. It is, we work like a collective, and I think all of us partners now have been together since 2016. What I'll quickly run you through are some non-commercial projects, and by non-commercial, I mean where the driving factor was not the fee, was not the scale, but the intent of the project. This is something that we've recently finished. It's called the Kasvatamu Pavilion. It's a small pavilion project that we've done in Helsinki. The idea was, there's a lot of these urban gray areas in Finland. These are usually courtyards which are completely tarred, and there is no percolation. They're very gray, and they almost just become parking lots. And to a large extent, the same context also applies to us in India. So the intent was to explore if we can convert these dead gray spaces into something of value to the city, something like an urban farm where people could interact with each other, grow their plants, grow herbs, and use them on a daily basis. So this is what we came up with as our direction. I'm sorry, this graphic is in Finnish, but I'll tell you what it means. This is basically outlining the uses that we wanted this pavilion to satisfy. We wanted people to be able to come there and grow their own herbs, to grow their own plants. We wanted it to be an extension of a cafe which is right next to it. We also wanted it to be a space for workshops where people could exchange knowledge and information on how to grow farms and how to develop farms in the urban context. We also wanted it to be an open pavilion where, sorry, am I still, yeah, okay. Where all users of the city could come and use it. We also wanted it to project a sense of temporality. We wanted it to even specifically look modular so that people would understand that, hey, you can take any scale, any size, any shape of a site and you could convert it to something useful. Hence, we selected scaffolding and timber platforms to do this project. This is when we started the construction. And I'm happy to say that as of now, the construction is complete, and thankfully, since Finland is moving away from the lockdown, there are already people using it now. Great. Quickly, this is another residential remodeling where we're doing out of our own interest, where we wanted to push the boundaries of what it is to bring nature into your house. How much can you do that? Can you do that enough to completely blur the boundaries of where your built environment is and where the nature is? And that's what we've tried to do here. This is another house that we did for a musician for a friend and a musician in a village close to Hyderabad. The brief here was it was a very interesting brief. This is a village where all the villagers, all the inhabitants of the village started doing these unsustainable concrete block houses because they thought they would last for 100 years and because they thought it's a good investment. And there was this loss of the language of I wouldn't say strictly vernacular, but this modern vernacular way of doing housing. So he wanted to create an example for the village, and that's what we've tried to achieve here. The house is, of course, heavily inspired from brick architecture. In the way that we've planned it, we wanted to create a large open gathering space. This is the central courtyard where you sit down is inspired from Kalyanis of our temples. We also have a backyard where we've retained this well from the previous house. The idea really is to have almost an open house, but at the same time, which gives you privacy, not just for daylight, but also for social interaction. This is a competition entry that we recently submitted. It's for the Hope Dental Clinic and College in Kigali in Africa. Here, basically, there were two challenges. This is a very, very gradient site, huge slope, and the function was also, the program of the brief was also very different. And at the same time, different in the way that they wanted a college, they wanted a clinic, they wanted living quarters, but at the same time, they wanted the campus to also be a public space, sort of for the town. So we designed, the way we approached this is we wanted to create a space where, of course, the function of the clinic and the function of the college was very secure and independent by itself, but also a large connecting space which would let people come in and enjoy what this space would be. And this was the outcome. You can see the two large functions that we've divided with the courtyard in between, which would act as a play area and generally a courtyard for people to come and relax in. Great. So those are some projects that I wanted to talk to you about today, but this is really the crux of the presentation that I wanted to talk to the students about. Now I want to talk to you about the path that I mentioned before. I was saying that sometime, I'm not sure if you heard me to here. Basically, what I want to talk to you about now, and this is the crux of what I want to speak to students about, is my lessons from this pursuit of purpose and motivation. Sometime back, I had the opportunity, I think last year, I had the opportunity of speaking at my previous organization about a few insights and realizations that I've had while I was looking for purpose and motivation as an architect. And these were motivation and purpose was something that I was always, that I found myself looking for as a creative person. So I hope you can relate to that. I would like to share those insights with you as well, through some examples of my life, right from when I was a student to now that I'm an architect. Now, I was one of those students who was preparing for an engineering entrance examination for about 5 years of my life, from 8th grade to 12th grade. And finally, the day came when I had to write my first engineering entrance examination. And somehow it was, that entire night, it was very troubling. I woke up and I decided to skip that exam. I had a feeling that this was not for me, so I went ahead and ended up skipping all my engineering exams that I had registered for. Over this time, I decided to take a year off and really explore and discover what I wanted to do in my life. It took me a year to figure out that architecture was the field for me, and I'm pretty sure most of you have done better than that. Now, before I joined architecture, during this sabbatical that I had the opportunity of taking, I didn't want to spend the year, studying for another examination, but simply wanted to focus on what my life's calling would be. I was lucky enough to have my parents' support for this. I understand that a lot of people don't have that, but if you have that, if you're clear about what you need, I'm sure all parents are very supportive. So I had this opportunity of starting this year with being a part of an expedition supported by the National Geographic. After which I worked with a youth organization called ISEC. I spent the entire sabbatical year meeting people, traveling to spaces. I realized that I wanted to be in the technical design industry, and that designing spaces was probably what interested me the most. Now, this entire year became a year of Kumbaya moments, and is probably the most important year that I've had in my initial years. Now, I understood the kind of opportunities that existed for me, right? And I was able to break them down during this year. There are some opportunities that literally just fall into your lap, and you have to make it most advantage of these opportunities. For me, it was being offered to be part of that expedition. And then there are some opportunities that you need to chase. You know they exist, and you want to chase them to make them happen, like wanting to be part of that youth organization. Which this organization has a long selection process, but I know I wanted to do that, so I worked hard for it and got it done. And then there are some opportunities that need to be created from scratch. For me, it was wanting to be an architect. I had no context on architecture when I started at square one. And which is why I believe that if you think something needs to be created, it doesn't have to be there. You can always create an opportunity from scratch. What I feel is that we must seek and build these opportunities ourselves or run after them, and if they don't exist, create them. And all three are important, and I think success will be eminent with a combination of these. We'll also come back to what success means to an architect a little later, but this is my combination for the right way of moving forward. Now, in architecture school, I had the opportunity of leading the student council at Ramaiah. We work towards the interests of the architecture students of Ramaiah School of Architecture. On the left, you can see some events and congregations that we built together. Thankfully, I had a brilliant team around me that helped make anything happen. Now, later during over that year, I had the opportunity of being part of the leadership of the National Association of Students of Architecture, or NASA as we call it, where we did the same except for the entire country student community. Now, that was a very enriching experience because I got to be part of national design competitions, trophies, conferences, publications, and it has been invaluable, the amount of things that I've learned. But what I'm getting at is that these experiences have made me realize the power of people coming together for common goals, to solve problems and to share knowledge and culture. And this is what led to my next set of insights, in fact, that if you're able to build communities around your passion, whatever it may be, doesn't necessarily have to be architecture, but if you're able to build those communities around your passion, it will only catapult them to unbelievable heights. Now, these communities will help create more opportunities for yourself and everybody else involved in them. And I feel that these opportunities can fuel your motivation and fuel our sense of purpose. Now, over the past few years, I've been lucky enough to be part of a beautiful community of designers and architects from around the world, of this network called IASA. I was part of the first Indian delegation that went to Malta in 2015, where we so this network, how it works is we basically come together once a year, we explore architecture, we do design workshops, we have talks, discussions, something like NASA, but in Europe. Now, I tutored 2 design and construction workshops at IASA, one in Croatia and one in Switzerland. And to be able to understand the different perspectives of architecture and life from people across the globe gave me my next biggest learning. I learned that architecture is very subjective. It's impossible to show that it's black or white. The best way to put it is that it's entirely gray. What it means is that if you understand the subjectivity, if you accept and acknowledge the subjectivity, it can be a superpower for you as a designer. Great. That brings me to my next segment, which I call the orientation. And this is me going back to my square one, where it all started at architecture school. And I want to share some of my insights on that. Now, obviously, I'll start with the $1 million question, right? Like this is how it started for me. I'm sure at some level for you as well. What is that? What is architecture? Is it the mother of all arts? Is it frozen music like Johann Wolfgang says, or is it simply creating spatial solutions for our users and our clients? Now, just like counting the number of lines on this graphic or trying to figure out the number of interpretations that you can make out of its composition, I feel it's very difficult to reach a consensus for that answer. And sometimes I am asked, how do you explain the difference between engineers and architects? And this is just a joke, so don't take me too seriously. But I jokingly explain that if you give a problem to 100 engineers, they will all give you one perfect, correct solution. But if you give a problem to 100 architects, they will surprise you with 100 different correct answers. What I mean by that is that architecture is not just about solutions. It's about thinking beyond solutions. It's literally about thinking of all the possibilities. And which is why it's not a course, which is why people tell you it's not just a career, but sometimes it becomes a way of life. I had a very nice professor at Ramaya who, on our first day of architecture school, said that, okay, guys, if you want to become an architect, you have to start living architecture, you have to start talking architecture, you have to eat and sleep architecture. Now, that was a bit alarming at that point, but now I understand what it necessarily means. That being said, for some people, architecture is a business. For some people, it's a calling. For some people, it's a way of life. You don't necessarily have to make it a religion. It's about where you find that middle ground with architecture. So, which also brings me to the question of what is it about architecture that makes us that way, right? I think what you should take away from the course is not just the knowledge to design and construct buildings, but it is the ability to be critical, analytical, to be somebody who can question things, who can learn, who can unlearn at the same time, somebody who can teach, who can be taught, somebody who can evaluate and be evaluated. It's like being entrusted with all the values that life has to offer, The idea is to broaden your horizons as much as possible and create this habit of understanding things at all levels, from all sides, micro, macro, every perspective possible. Now, it's also funny to me how, someday we realize that all the jargon you learn in architecture school also sometimes applies to life, and because you have, why architecture, it's called an architecture school also, right? Because just like medicine or law, it's called a school because you have to forget everything you've learned before that and start from scratch, even writing alphabets for that matter. And I think you will also hear a lot of people say that architecture school teaches you nothing and it's completely different when you get out. But I'll tell you why that is. It's because it takes 5 years to develop that attitude and that aptitude to get ready to learn. And from then on, it's learning for the rest of your life. And which is also why we call it a practice. It's because you can never be perfect, right? I also think you should remember that the most important thing you can take away from architecture school now is your ability to create your own process and approach, because architecture is literally infinite and it's never constant. And that's also why that for me is also one of the most beautiful things about it. Now I've realized that good architects have found themselves at an intersection of what they love to do, what they're good at doing, and what they can make a living out of, right? And if that's something that has a positive impact on the world, then even better. So which is why I bring you back to this. My understanding of the Maslow's pyramid is that it's not a pyramid of hierarchy for architects. For architects, it's like a continuous circle of needs that we deal with. Sometimes we chance upon ourselves, upon self-actualization, and then worry about basic needs. I feel that sometimes we sometimes approach all of these needs together, and I think that also makes life more fulfilling as designers. And I don't think we should be intimidated by society's notion of success, by architects, or by these conventional notions of starting your own firm, hiring a lot of people. I don't necessarily think that's true. Some architects find success in small sustainable practices. Some architects find it in building large design engines. Some find it in writing, and some find it in speaking. Some find it in doing 100 projects, but some find it in doing that one project perfectly. So this is when I'm coming back to what success should mean to us as architects. It should be something that you find motivation and purpose in. So with that, I want to leave you with one final thought, and this is with our current context. I think the COVID situation has only been a sneak peek into how devastating even bigger problems that are yet to come, like climate change. And this is what's going to happen if you're not more thoughtful and resource oriented in the way we deal with our planet, especially architecture, because let's not forget that construction is the most polluting and resource consuming industry in the world. And I think our job is to be catalysts of a change that will move that to a more resource, more thoughtful, more resource driven process. So with that, I want to end, and I hope we are all able to orient ourselves, create our own paths, and go beyond.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
We have a few questions from our delegates, sir.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how the DIY approach that you experimented with earlier helped you in your projects for ROOH? And were you able to apply the concept in any of your project as well?
Okay, no, that's a great question. The way we experience our DIY projects is it literally gave us that hands-on experience of how details of spaces work. As something as simple as how do you connect two members of wood together? How do you do that without using screws? You know, how do you connect two very different materials like scaffolding and timber platforms together? How do you apply finishes? How do you actually make that happen, right? It gave us insight into a couple of things. One is what that specific detail is that you need to think of, and every time you're thinking of a project, and there are some projects that you have to dive into that detail, right? How is that window fixture? How does that window fixture work? How does that platform sit on the in the kitchen, etc. Second is the scale and just the complexity of executing a project. When we ourselves are building these small pavilions, it makes you understand how complex a building really is. You have hundreds of people coming together, putting together maybe thousands and thousands of components that have to work beautifully like a machine. It really gives you an insight into how complex a building really is. And third is project planning and project management in general, right? That's something, again, we tend to miss out on as architecture students. It's important to understand how and on what level your project is going to be executed. Who are the stakeholders involved? What role are these people playing? Does it even make, the way you've designed your project, does it even make sense? Is there a sense of the process of execution? So I think I would say those are some of the learnings that we applied back into our practice.
Okay. One more question we have. Could you please tell us a bit more about affordable housing and how it is impacting the today's approach of livelihood?
Oh, sure. I think we all can agree that affordable housing units is one of the biggest factors and of the Indian urban realm. We know that there's a massive influx of migrants in and out of cities. We know that informal housing, or as we call them slums, are an integral part of the city. Where we fail, as architects and planners, we tend to forget the duality of these cities. The way we plan and do urban design is we tend to always exclude the underprivileged from this utopian idea that we have of the city. The right way to do that, and why affordable housing is important, that informal housing will always be an integral part of Indian cities, because there will always have migrants who are looking for opportunities, better quality of life. The way to respond to that is not by displacing them and displacing the users and putting them in another housing complex outside the city. That doesn't work. The way to deal with that is to increase the quality of the services, to make sure that the social quality of life that they have in their current informal housing is maintained while you sort of regenerate the city. And that coupled with the fact that we have a massive population that is looking for affordable housing, that is dependent on government programs to be able to find housing. Since population is one of the biggest factors for urbanization in India, I think any urban discourse should have affordable housing as a part of it.
One more question we have, sir.
Yes.
How is weatherproofing of the prototype shelter done, as the fabric looks very delicate?
That's an interesting question. So the fabric that we prototype with, the red and white, the sort of the previous one that you saw was literally what you call the gamcha cloth from Kolkata. That's what we used to prototype with. And then the brown brown green, the camo green fabric that we started building our actual working prototypes with is a weatherproof fabric that is used for creating tents and bags and jackets. It's from a company called Extreme Textile. So we use that because it's super light, super thin. At the same time, it's almost impossible to tear and works great in all weathers. So that was our selection for prototyping that project. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the answers. Now,
are those all the questions?
Yes, sir. That's it.
I would love to answer some more questions if there are any.
Okay. So on behalf of our chairman, now I would like to call upon our professor, Architect Arunachal sir, to speak few words.
Yeah. Hi, Sagar. So it was, first of all, I didn't know that you were, giving this session. I was so delighted, So I think it's for all students, because I think he's one of my favorite students. I mean, because he has balanced education and co-curricular activities very well. Okay. Sagar, you know what? I mean, I would like to tell everybody, morning I messaged, such a leader Sagar is. If I tell him to bring the moon, he'll tell that, sir, I'll get it in the evening. So that is Sagar. I mean, that is,
I really appreciate
it. To be very frank. So
I think it was nice to have supportive professors and educators in our college, and that's what
correct.
A bunch of us really find our way in our professional lives.
So it is nice to see a holistic view about architecture from your side. And it's really, I mean, I think we are meeting you. I mean, even Durga is here. I think we are meeting you after college.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think you graduated in 2014, right?
16, actually.
Yeah. So it's wonderful to understand that you have gained a lot of knowledge in this 4-5 years. Yeah. I think when we talk about confidence, positive attitude, and motivation, I think Sagar is the person, because I worked in Ramaya for 12 years, and I remember Sagar was these 3 words: confidence, positive attitude, and motivation. So I think Sagar, I think that should fulfill any architect's career. I mean, it's very, very nice to have you on the webinar session, and it was a nice presentation. In fact, I was listening through, and it is very nice the way you expressed, architecture, what I've understood, and I think you have not forgotten some of our words. When I did understand that you are telling talk architecture, walk architecture, yeah.
Never.
So it is nice, Sagar.
Thank you so much.
And we'll stay connected, and we request you to help our institution in all manners, being seminars, anything. So we'll surely stay connected.
Thank you. I hope I was able to add some value. Yes.
Thank you again for a very inspirational talk.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jyoti.
Yeah. A very special thanks to our guest speaker, Architect Saagar Tulshan, for doing a thoughtful, thought-provoking and impactful presentation. I thank all the principals and faculty members of various departments and all the administration. I thank our principal, Dr. Ganesh Babu sir, for his unstinted support for this session. I thank our webinar coordinator, Architect Senthil Kumar, and broadcast coordinator, Architect Harshita, for evincing interest in covering the event. Thank you to the management of AAAD for extending their support for our endeavors. I thank all the guests and delegates for accepting our invitation. Thank you, everyone.